The desert was already dimming when the train pulled away, leaving only the sigh of iron wheels fading into the horizon. What lingered was dust, always dust, rising like ghosts from the platform, drifting through the ribs of warped planks and the cracked glass of the lantern swinging overhead. Clementine sat on the bench as if she'd been carved there. Her shawl wrapped tight, cheek pressed to the ragged carpetbag she carried. The wind lifted strands of her dark hair, brushing them across her lips, but she didn't stir. She looked neither at the departing train nor at the empty town that hunched a mile off. She looked at nothing. Silas Boone rode in from the feed store, his mare's hooves hollow on the wooden planks. He hadn't meant to stop, just to pass by, salt blocks slung over the saddle, but his eyes snagged on her. The lamplight bent across her face in a way that made him pause. She looked like someone whose name had been taken away. He would write that later, in his quiet hand, between pages never shown to anyone. For a long moment he stood there, unsure if he'd speak. He'd spent years in silence, words rusting in his chest. Yet something opened, unbidden. "You're coming with me," he said. And she rose without question, as if she had been waiting for that one line to lift her back into the world. The first days passed in a hush. Clementine hardly spoke, hardly ate. Her movements were small, her body coiled as if each sound might strike. She winced when the screen door slammed. She flinched when the stove popped. Silas did not press her. He left bread on the table, left water by her bedside. He stacked firewood higher than usual so the wind would not sneak through and startle her. He moved more slowly than his habit, giving his silence as though it were a gift. At night, though, he heard, from the narrow hallway, from behind her closed door, gasping sobs strangled into the pillow, broken by sudden cries. Once he heard words torn out of her, "No more, please, no more," followed by the thick hush of shame. He stood there in the dark, his palms flat against the doorframe, aching to push through. But he didn't. He let her fight through her ghosts alone, because he knew some battles could not be joined by another. In the morning, her eyes were red but dry. She had washed the dishes until they shone, lined them neat as soldiers. When he reached for a cup, she pulled her hand back quickly as though touch were fire. Silas said nothing, only nodded, and her gaze fell like a stone into the sink. The ranch had its own rhythm, and she began to fit into it, not by command but by quiet gravity. She rose before dawn to sweep the porch. She brushed the horses, though she never once saddled one. She scrubbed laundry until her knuckles reddened. Sometimes, when she thought herself alone, she hummed little scraps of melody, trembling and thin, like a bird remembering flight. Silas listened from the barn, a strange warmth climbing his chest. Each morning he placed a wildflower at her seat before breakfast. He never mentioned it. She never threw it away. Sometimes, in the evening, he'd notice them pressed between the pages of her carpetbag Bible. One dusk, when he returned from the pasture, he found his journal open on the table. She was nowhere in sight, but the way the chair was pulled told him she had sat there, eyes over his words. He felt raw, stripped. His words were the only place he allowed his soul to show. Verses about loneliness, about the way the sky could swallow a man whole, about wishing for something gentle in the world. The next day she baked cornbread. With honey. She did not say a word. The first time they went into town together, silence followed them like a second shadow. At the mercantile, voices dipped low. At the well, eyes slid sharp. "He brought home a whore," someone muttered. "She's a widow," another answered. "Don't mean she's decent." Clementine's shoulders hunched smaller with each step. She didn't look up, didn't speak. By the time they hitched the wagon again, she sat stiff, her hands locked around her skirt. That night in the saloon, Silas heard it again. The laughter behind him, the sneer carried on whiskey breath. Boone's charity case. Filthy little. Silas didn't swing a fist. He only turned, eyes flat as the desert horizon, and said low enough to carve, "Say her name again. I dare you." The room went quiet. Later, at the ranch, she asked him in a voice thin but steady, "Why did you bring me back?" Silas set his hat down, looked at the fire, then at her. "Because I saw a soul that hadn't been treated kind." She didn't answer. But that night when he sat by the fire, she came and sat too. Not close, not touching, but near. And that was enough. It was spring thaw when one of the maras slipped on the ridge, her leg bent at a cruel angle. Silas brought his rifle, steady in hand. He would end the pain quick. But Clementine darted forward, arms spread, trembling as she blocked him. "There's another way," she said, voice shaking but alive. "Just give her time. Don't take her yet." It was the first time she'd spoken with fire. Silas lowered the rifle, struck by the blaze in her eyes. Together they hauled the mare into a makeshift pen, bound her leg, nursed her with poultices and patience. Clementine sat at her side through the long nights, crooning those half-remembered hums until the mare stilled. Weeks passed, and against all odds the animal healed. She limped, yes, but she lived. Silas never said it aloud, but in the quiet of his journal he wrote, "She saved more than the mare. She saved something in me." By summer, the ranch had settled into a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Clementine laughed once, just once, when a calf butted its head into Silas's hip. The sound startled them both. But town still carried its whispers. When they came for supplies, women drew their skirts aside, men spat near Silas's boots. Clementine heard it, always heard it. Her eyes grew shadowed again. One night she asked, not with fear but with quiet resolve, "Will you always fight their words?" Silas stared at the horizon, stars spilling silver. "I don't give a damn what they say." And after a long pause he added, "But if you want to go, if you want to find someplace where no one knows you, I'll take you there." Her breath caught. She looked at him, at the man who had given her silence instead of questions, patience instead of demands. She shook her head. "No, I want to stay." And she sat closer that night by the fire. So close their shoulders touched. The days folded one into another. Work, small meals, quiet evenings. Nothing grand. Nothing that would be sung in saloons. But there was a tenderness in it, a slow unfurling of trust. One dawn, Silas saddled 2 horses instead of 1. Clementine came out, shawl still wrapped. He handed her the reins, no words. She hesitated, then swung up, her skirt falling around the saddle. Her hands were unsteady at first, but she steadied herself by the rhythm of the animal beneath her. They rode out to the ridge where the land opened wide. The wind rushed fierce, carrying every story and every scar into the endless sky. No audience. No applause. Just them and the earth and the horizon. Clementine looked over at him. He met her eyes. Neither spoke. They had chosen, not with vows, not with rings, but with the quiet dignity of presence. 2 souls who had been bruised into silence now breathing in rhythm, side by side. And under that vast New Mexico sky, the world felt like it had finally offered them a home. The wind was witness.